Guten Woch. Shalom Aleichem to all of you. Tonight is Motzei Shabbos, Parshas Noach, Tov Shin Pei Daled. I want to start actually with a Dvar Torah. Some time ago, Jonathan Teller, used to live in Stafford Hill, now lives in Edgware, gave me two Sidurim of his great-grandfather, who was a Rov, dying here in London about 120 years ago. And over Sukkot, I was browsing through them and I noticed a couple of notes on the margins. Not many, 3 or 4 notes on the margins. One of them I just copied out tonight. So I'm going to share it with you. It's on the chapter of in Tehillim of Yoshev V'Seiser Elyon. We have there the words Rak einecho sabit v'shilumas rishoyim tire. Only you with your eyes you will glance and you will see the ending. Shilumas understood as being the ending of the wicked. You will see. So he asks, why is there the choice of words Shilumas rishoyim, which could be translated as the payment for rishoyim? Why not sheber rishoyim, the breaking? Oynish Rishoyim, the punishment, Suras Rishoyim, the suffering of the Rishoyim. Why does David HaMelech choose the word of Shilumas? Question number 1. Question number 2, what's the rak? Rak beinecho sabit. What's the rak only? Furthermore, he could have just said, beinecho tabit Shilumas Rishoyim. With your eye you will see the retribution for the wicked. Why do you have to have the word tire at the end? So we've got 3 questions. Again, why the choice of words shilumas? Secondly, what's the meaning of the word rak at the beginning? And thirdly, why does it have to have the word tire at the end? So these are the 3 questions. So he invokes the famous Gemara at the end of Gemara of Tainis, where Rabbi Akiva, with his friends, with his colleagues, were passing by the site of the Beis Hamikdash, and they see how it was, the foxes were running over the desolate site, and they were crying, and he consoles them. And one of his words of consolation were, if this is how those who violate get away with it, those who fulfill Hashem's wish, how much more so that they will be rewarded. And therefore, when we look at Rishoyim having it good, so that is for us a proof that the tzaddikim will get great schar, and they will get it in a much more complete way. And therefore, when we look at Shilumas Rishoyim, as in the reward of the Rishoyim, so then that itself is a lesson how tzaddikim will be rewarded so much more. And that's the usage of rak beinecho sabit. Just a brief glance, even a brief glance with your seichel, just a little bit, you will already see from the Shilumas Rishoyim, you will see tire, you will see how your reward would be so much greater if you'll have your faith in Hashem be'emes, and that is v'shilumas Rishoyim tire, when you will see their retribution, their reward. So Hashem pays everyone for any good which they've done. How much more so that you will be rewarded from Hashem. So this is the Hemshech HaPasuk. You put your trust in Hashem, and then it goes on. You're putting your faith in Hashem, be'emes. So then, you will not see, you not be encountering any evil. May we merit that Hashem should give us the feeling of bitochen, belev sholem, and we should see Ach toiv chesed kol yemei chayenu. I'm going to go now into our questions. So the first question, timely, a girl in Sem in Eretz Yisrael. She's asking the question if she hears the alarm and the protocol is that they should immediately go to a protected room. So these rooms apparently are thick concrete walls with a strong door, which would be locked from the inside. And she comes to the safe room, and there's a single man there, and she's a single girl. So now she's asking. It hasn't happened. She's asking if chas v'sholom there is an alarm, and that's what does she do? Now, actually, it's a very good question. Why so? So there is the concept of, we all know there's three averis, three sins for which we are not allowed to violate, even at the pain of death, and they are Gila Arroyos, adultery, incest, etc., Shvichas Dam, murder, and Aveda Zara. So we've got these three Avedas. Now there's a famous story of Tamar, who was the daughter-in-law of Yehuda, and when she became pregnant and she was accused of being unfaithful to her late husband, whatever it may be, to her family, she was going to be burnt at stake. And then she sends a message to Yehuda. She sends a signet ring and the staff, etc., and allowing Yehuda to choose whether to own up or not. So otherwise, she was ready to be burnt at stake. So the question is, why was she, on what basis? So the explanation is given when you embarrass someone. So it says it's like a murder, because the person, when they get embarrassed, they blanch, the color drains, the blood drains from their face. So it's a kind of murder. So therefore, just like not to murder someone, one should be ready to have Mesiras Nefesh, not to murder another person. Similarly, not to embarrass another person. And that was the logic of Tamar. And we've got various stories over the generations where people were ready to suffer terribly not to cause embarrassment to some. Now, the term in Halacha is abizrayu. Abizrayu means the accessories. It's used now in modern Hebrew. Abizar would mean like the bits and pieces or tools, whatever it may be. But what abizrayu means, the accessories. So we've got the primary three sins of Avodah Zarah, Gilas, and Shvichas Damim. Then we've got the associated things. Now there's a famous. I was explaining this to the boys last week in class. So there's a famous story that Reb Mendel Chaim was. I have to share with you. Reb Mendel used to talk about Reb Mendel Chaim. Tremendous praise of Reb Mendel Chaim. He was a brilliant man, and I'm going to come back to the point. Reb Mendel Chaim, one time there was a meeting of the leaders of Russian Jewry, and it was a closed meeting, only for the mamish, for the Gedolei Hadoir. It was so Reb Chaim Brisker, or perhaps Reb Chavetz Chaim, whatever it was, and the Rebbe Rashab was there, and Reb Mendel Chaim was with him. He was a young man. So someone turned to him, but we agreed only the top brass are going to come in. So he says, "Das is my rechte hand. This is like my hand. This is." Reb Mendel was a brilliant man. He became Rav in Yezhin. There's a whole story how when there were the proposition of Rabbanos in Yezhin came up, and it would be with votes, etc., etc. And the Rebbe Rashab went specially to Yezhin to campaign to get Reb Mendel in. He was really very, very a very special person. At any rate, I'm not sure the exact year, but there were pogroms in Russia, and when Yezhin is in Ukraine. I was there by the Mittel Rebbe is buried in Yezhin. So there were pogroms in Ukraine, and he was kind of caught in the in the street. There was a pogrom, and the local vicar offered him to come for refuge into the church. He said, "Here, you'll be safe." And Mendel refused, and he was killed by the pogrom in that pogrom. So you have this idea. Well, going to the church doesn't mean he becomes a Christian, chas v'shalom, but it's part of it. So it's a valid question. So here now, yichud is part of the family, should we say, of the Isur of Gila Rois, and hence the question. So I didn't answer off the cuff. It's okay. I wanted to look into it, but I'm pleased to share with you what you have on the screen. As you can see, is from the Sefer Nite Gavriel. Yichud in case of pikuach nefesh. He's more talking about going to an ambulance, etc. The single driver, but it's the same question, yeah. So there are those who say that yichud would not be allowed for pikuach nefesh because it's an accessory associated with the gila rois. However, yichud rabbonon, if it is the rabbonon, that would be permitted. However, there are those who are more lenient and say it is allowed. Okay. So now, she's a girl, an unmarried girl. An unmarried girl, yichud of a penuya, that is a din, that's a isur drabonon. An unmarried woman to have a state of yichud is a isur drabonon. And therefore, we have here the second line is saying if it's isur drabonon, it is permitted. Are you going to ask, what about if she's an unmarried girl? She's never gone to mikveh. That was the Isur Nida. The answer is that Isur Nida doesn't make it an Isur Yichud min HaTorah because it's the Isur which can be resolved. As a mikveh, it can be resolved. Whereas if she was an Eishasi, this question would be stronger. I want to perhaps point out another thing, that the Isur Yichud is more about the concern of seduction rather than forced happenings. At any rate, so for an unmarried girl, it's yichud rabbanon, that would be permitted for her to go into the room and be in a state of yichud. Then there's a second opinion which says even as yichud shel Torah, so if it's a married woman and her husband isn't in town, that could be a more serious shaila, but still, push comes to shove, the halacha is going to be that it's mutter. Okay. I think I might have got it wrong, that the story is not in Tainus but in Marcus. I didn't look it up. Sorry. Right, the story of Rabbi Akiva and his Chalderim. Now, I just want to perhaps, I think it's an important point. It's always uncomfortable to discuss, but I think it's important to discuss. About 45 years ago, there was a terrible story of a woman from Williamsburg who had gone to some department store, Bloomingdale's, whatever it was, some department store, and possibly she was married to a Kohen. The lift boy took her down in the lift to the basement. He did what he did, and then he murdered her, and her body was found with the garbage. At the time, there's a whole big tumult, and it was said that by the Rabban at the time that the Noshim Tzidkonios should be told that they're not mechuyev to have Mesiras Nefesh in such an event. They're not mechuyev to give up their life. The reason being that we have the story with Esther. Esther Hamalkos, it says Esther had relations with Achashverosh, even though she was married at the time to Mordechai. And it says, the Gemara says, Esther karka oilam hoyso. She was passive. She didn't initiate anything. And therefore, in the passive state, she doesn't have to have Mesiras Nefesh. When Mordechai asked her to go to Achashverosh, and then she says she's very worried, and she's one of the things which she said, the way it says in the Gemara, she says, "Till now I was ba'oinus. Then I could come back to you. But if I go willingly, offer my being close willingly, so then I'm no longer an oinus. Then I won't be able to come back to you." That's the way the Gemara explains Esther's conversation with his messages with Mordechai. At any rate, it's something which I'm uncomfortable to discuss, but I think it's something which, as I understand, then it was felt it is important that it should be known that a woman does not have to be Moshe Nefesh in such an event. Let's move on to the next question, much more positive thing that we have now, also associated with the war. Many soldiers are asking for tzitzis, and I guess they need more than one pair of tzitzis because it change, etc. So there's become a whole shortage, or a whole demand, should we say, of tzitzis, and they need to be braided in by people. So a woman asked me, is she permitted to join in this braiding of the tzitzis? So here we have from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Sim Yud Dalet, in Sif Beis, that he first says a woman is eligible to braid tzitzis into a garment. Then there's a second opinion which says just like a woman can't write tefillin, so the same thing, she shouldn't be making tzitzis. Bottom line is that the halacha is that a woman could braid tzitzis. However, it's better lechatchila to go according to the latter svara. So it's toiv lezor lechatchila. That's quite a how do you say? It doesn't make it a major issue. It makes it a minor issue. So if there's a shortage, one could rely on having women putting in tzitzis. What I would suggest also is that if there is a need and we want to bring in women to be braiding tzitzis, if a man would do the first chulya, which means the first double knot and 7 circuits and a second double knot, so if the man does the first chulya, then that's already got a minimum of, it's already a kosher tzitzis, and whatever else is done is extra, and if necessary, that could be done by women also. Let's move on to the next question. Nothing to do with this has got to do with ice cream wafers, so nothing to do with the Malchama. So someone asked me an ice cream cone. I firstly asked about the bracha. If the ice cream cone is not sweet, just bland, do you have to make a separate bracha on the cone? And so the answer on that is no, you don't have to. The ice cream cone is sweet, then you make a bracha on the ice cream cone separately to the ice cream. But if it's a very bland thing, that doesn't need a bracha. That's how contemporaries follow. Then he asks, what about pas akum? If it's from a non-Jewish factory, it does a wafer. So my first reaction was that it has to be pas Yisrael. And then he writes back, it's not so poshut, which he's right. And the question is like this, and actually I Googled to see how wafers are made. So it is actually a very ruddy batter. And you can see how it's this very thin, runny mixture, very thin. It's a thin mixture, which is poured onto a surface, and then that's how it becomes these thin wafers. So here the question is, does a runny dough, does that acquire the din of pas to become subject to pas akum, etc.? So there is this is discussed and alluded to something in Shulchan Aruch. The discussion is Siman Kufyud Beis, that's the din of pas akum. And there's a shach which seems to be saying that if it's a blilo racho, there's no din of pas akum. However, other maposkim disagree with this, and here you have the Aruch HaShulchan who says Chol shebliloso racho, even if it's a runny mixture, it's not fried, it's made in a dry pan, then it would be called lechem. Also, it's relevant in Koivei Asuda. If you have a lot of mezonos, we all know this, that if you have a considerable amount of mezonos, it becomes hamoitzi. Yeah? So what happens if you have a very generous amount of wafers? Would it become hamoitzi? So you look in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, Alter Rebbe's Siddur, in Seder B'chas Hanenin, where he talks about the 3 types of mezonos, of truknin and lachmanios and pasah babakisnin. Then he also talks about trisa, whether trisa is considered lechem when there's a kviya suda or not. And he brings both opinions. So there are those who say that because it's a runny mixture, it never becomes pas by definition. Others do take the position that because it's becoming a finished, like a cracker or something, the end product, fact that it was a running mixture doesn't matter, and it's still a pass. So the question whether it's passed for kover sudo or for pas Yisrael, it's the same question. So, but coming back to our question, does an ice cream wafer need to be pas Yisrael? So you could take the view that since you're talking about an Issa Rabbanon, therefore you can rely on the lenient position that it doesn't need to be pas Yisrael. Yeah, that you can, if necessary, rely on that. On the other hand, as Chassidim, we are more mahader, and ice cream wafers are not exactly a necessity in life. We can manage, it's not the kind of thing we have to start finding coolers for. Therefore, if where possible, it should be pas Yisrael. If it's not possible, and there is, for whatever reason, you need to serve wafers, then yesh al ma'alismech to not be pas Yisrael. In any case, when there's no pas Yisrael Mitzuyo, there's a heter to do, but to use pas palter. Again, as far as I know, all our thousands of shluchim, v'chol mokim sheheh, do not, I believe they do not rely on this, that because there's no pas Yisrael Mitzuyo, they can use pas palter. As far as I know, they're all making sure to have pas Yisrael. Let's move on. Okay. So one of our dedicated listeners asked me about wearing a gartel or taking a gartel into a Beis HaKisei. So several years ago, I published a sefer called Nesiim B'Seach Shliches, Volume 2, and there was written that you are allowed to enter into a bathhouse, a mikvah, or Beis HaKisei wearing a gartel. That's what I wrote, that you are allowed to. And in the notes you have here that going with a talus into Beis HaKisei, you're not allowed to. And then it says that the garments which you used for serving the garments which you use in the kitchen, shouldn't use for serve as a waiter to serve your master. So it's not so much the space, but as much it's more the what you do whilst you're wearing it. You shouldn't wear it whilst you're doing something which is how you say, not respectful. Having said that, so someone then sent me after that was printed. This is the downside when you print something. So then it's too late. Then someone sends you a correction and it's already in print. Yeah. Okay, but you know what? The other side of it is like this. If I hadn't printed, I would have remained with the mistake. Like this, I printed and someone corrects me. Now I can correct it. Okay. So now someone sent me. This is a sefer called V'horin B'Ser Secha. This is the Morristown Yeshiva over many years would publish the Ha'oros Atmimim, parallel to the Ha'oros Habiurim published by Al-Tayri, and Ha'oros Atmimim coming out from Morristown, and these were the main main koiftzim where the Rebbe would often answer the Farbrengens. And so they put together all the answers of the Rebbe which they had received over the years, and they put it into a whole sefer called V'horin B'Ser Secha, plus a few other tidbits and letters, etc., which weren't published elsewhere. So here we have Reb Zalman Volshansky, who is Rosh Hashiva in Morristown. So he says two things. Number one, he heard from Reb Leibel Bistritsky, Olav Shalom, who heard from the Rebbe that you shouldn't enter the Beis HaKisei with a gartel. Does that mean you shouldn't be wearing, or you shouldn't even carry it in? That you can learn either way. But meanwhile, not like he had written, simply that you are allowed to go in with it. No, one should not go in to Beis HaKisei with a gartel, because it's we wear a gartel because it's meyuchad tefillah. It's like hikon lekras lekecha, to prepare yourself to speak to Hashem. Therefore, it's disrespectful that the same thing you should be having in a place which is not a respectful place. The second point, which is he writes, is that at the same event. And that's my same conversation with Rebbe Leibel Bistritsky. He said that the Rebbe had told him, or does it mean the Rebbe at the same event told him? The Rebbe told him that a kittel, now we wear on Yom Kippur, we wear a kittel. Now, normally when you buy a kittel, it's open all the way down, like a coat, all the way down to from top to bottom. And the Rebbe told him that the kittel actually should be closed at the lower half, in a way that to wear it, you have to pull it over your head. So when I got my my kittel. That's over 40 years ago. So someone pointed this out to me, that it should be that it should be that it's like a nightshirt, that you have to pull it over your head, not open all the way down. So I took a needle and thread and sewed the lower half. And since then, every time I have to pull it over and take it off. But okay, so that's, you have this source. So now Motzei Shabbos, I think there's a minute not to sew, so you can leave it till tomorrow. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. Yeah. Okay. So here I have a question from a shliach actually in France, that he has Beis Chabad, and Shabbos afternoon they have, after Shabbos, after Shachar is Musaf, they have a Farbrengen, and sometimes a bit of the Farbrengen leaves a Roshim on the floor. So then people are going to come to Mincha and they're going to see, we won't go into all the details. So he's keen to have the place tidied up, presentable for Mincha. So you have a femme de ménage, he has a cleaner who comes in. What if the cleaner takes a mop or takes a machine? Are you allowed to ignore it? Or do you have to intervene and say, no, you can only just use a broom, etc.? So there is a klal, which I don't have on the screen. There's a klal in the Dinim of Amir el-Nochri. And by the way, if someone wants to have a list of the parameters of Amir el-Nochri, and you see Gimel, you have 9 or 10 rules of when Amir el-Nochri is the Haterium for that. So one of the Haterium is, if you tell the guy to do a job for you, and it's a job which can be done in a permitted way, but the guy chooses to do it in a forbidden way, so that's something which is tolerable. They're doing it for their own benefit, for their own convenience. There's 2 levels in this, and that is, let me clarify. There's one is, you ask the woman to wash the dishes, and she switches on the light. She could have washed it with less light. So that's one level. That's straightforward. It's not a problem. There's another thing. You tell her to schlep chairs from A to B, and instead of taking him up the stairs, she uses the lift. So then the difference is that the melacha that she's doing is to carry out your mission. She's doing it in a forbidden way. That's different to when she's doing your mission in a permitted way. She's just putting on the light to make things easier. So there, the Alter Rebbe is a little bit more restrictive about it, but there's room to be met. Okay. So now you're asking her to clean up the room, and she's taking a mop. Is that okay? So what we have here is this discussion in Shulchan Aruch is in Siman Shin Lamed Zayin. There it's talking about sweeping the floor, and there's the worry that you might there might be cracks between the floorboards or whatever it may be. It might be mashveh gumos. Anyway, that's the main discussion, which I'm not going to go into. Nowadays, in our indoors, it's hardly an issue. Meanwhile, the Kaf HaChaim brings here, you can see it on the screen, he brings from Rabbi Yaakov Castro. So Rabbi Yaakov Castro, I looked up, was a contemporary of the Rabbi Yosef Karo and the Arizal. He actually, he was a Rov in Mitzrayim, and he did go up to, he met the Rabbi Yosef Karo in Tzfas. At any rate, so he puts on record. So on the lower part is the Sefer Ole Yaakov from Yaakov Castro. It's not so easy to read. So the upper is the Kaf HaChaim, where he's quoting the Yaakov Castro, and he says the following: in Egypt, in the Eretz Yisrael, it was common that they would have a goysha maid or a manservant would wash the floor, which had flooring, and they would use a shmata, and they would for wiping the floor, and they would wring it out and then put it down again, and they would mop the floor, and then with a rag, and etc. So that's a problem, yeah. So he writes, "V'yesh lelamed aleim zchus," that one could condone this practice, because the goy is he's just doing it to make his life easier. Because he could actually wash the floor with lots of water and then sweep it with a straw broom. But he wants to do it quicker. That's why he's using the shmata. That's reason number one. Number two, better that the women should be acting in error unwittingly than they should do so knowingly. They should sin knowingly. So he has one explanation in Lomdus, and one is they're not going to listen in any case. Better let them do as they wish, as they're doing. So that's the Yaakov Castro. Let's just read on the other side. You have here from the Mishnah Berurah, where he writes that the washing of a wooden floor, as we do today, besides the issue of leveling cracks, there's another issue to do it, besides the actual washing. That you have to soak the shmata in water. All right, let's come back. So we have here a heter that when the goy has an alternative to use a straw broom to wash the floor, and then instead chooses to use a shmata, that would be okay. Now, I told this to this shliach in France. He says, well, actually, that's not so convenient over here. In Israel, the way the houses are built, Baruch Hashem, I've never checked out what the houses are in Mitzrayim, but the way they build houses in Israel, stone floors, stone tiles, granite tiles, and in the corner there's a plug hole, and you wash the floor with lots of water. Then you use this sponger and this rubber squeegee kind of thing, and you bring the water to the corner, and that's how you wash the floor. So when there is that option, so then the goy has got the option to wash in a permitted way, and the fact they're using geshmata is therefore allowable. But if you don't have that kind of facility, you don't have that kind of floor, you don't have this drainage in the corner, and you don't have this sponge, this squeegee kind of thing either. So then this heter doesn't seem to apply. So therefore, we're a bit struggling, yeah. So we have a heter from Kaf HaChaim, from the Yaakov Castro, but that would only be where there is an option of doing it in a permitted way. Where there is no such option, we have a bit of a problem. Okay, so that seems to be our problem. I have now then, still, we have here the other heter, but he's asking the question. I want to ask you, and I discussed it last night in Shul also, what exactly is the melacha of using a mop? And I'm going to explain. We have a term schita, which means wringing out. There's two types of schita. There's schita of grapes, of fruit to get juice out. Schita and getting juice out of a fruit, that is a subsidiary, a tolda of dosh, of threshing, releasing the juice which is inside the grape. So when you want the juice, when you squeeze something and you want the liquid which is coming out, that is a melacha deraisa schita tolda dosh. Then we have another type of schita. You've washed a garment and then it's sopping wet, and so you wring it out. So normally when you've washed something, part of the act of washing is that you wring out the water afterwards, and that gets the dirty water out. So it's part of, so again, we've got two types of schita. One is when you want the liquid, or one is when you want the cloth clean. In the case of the squeezing the mop, the water to get the water onto the floor, I can throw with a bucket. I don't need to have a mop to get the water, the floor wet. Perhaps not so convenient, but I could do it. And also, I don't think when you take a mop and you lift it and it's full of water and it spills on the floor, I don't see that as schita. Schita is with using pressure, but it's just lifting a mop and it's going to be draining water onto it. I don't see that as schita. So where's the schita? When you take the mop and you put it back into the mop bucket and you turn it around kind of to wring out the water. You don't need the water. You picked up the water from the floor, and now you're going to throw this water away. So I don't see this as schita tul de dosh because you don't need the water. What are you going to say? I'm wringing it out to make the mop clean. I'm not interested in the mop being clean. I don't see it. I'm not washing them up. Chas v'sholem to say a heter for a yid to do mopping the floor. We all know that's us, and all the poskim, the contemporary malachtim say it's not okay. But I'm looking here for somehow to mitigate that the guy who's mopping the floor is not doing a malacha, which for me would be a deraisa, because it's not schita till the dosh, not schita till the melaben. Therefore, let's say it's the rabbanon, okay, whatever it may be, and therefore to ask a guy to do it, the mitzvah is permitted. I'm saying this because he's not the only one who has this, and we've all been in very choshev places, and we've seen that earlier in the day the place was an absolute tip, and later in the day it looks presentable, and obviously someone had come in and done it. So I'm just being malamazchus on what I did tell. So someone's pointing out that when you wipe them up on the floor, you're squeezing it. That's true. But what I said before, you don't need to use a mop to get the water on the floor. You could take the bucket and throw water on the floor. Therefore, it's possible b'derech heter. You could just sprinkle water on the floor, and so the fact that you're using the mop to do so, again, that's your choice. Kol ponim, what I told the shliach is that it's better to avoid it, but if it looks really very unpresentable, then and it's a chil Hashem, etc., then yesh al malisvoich to allow the guy to use a mop. Okay, let's move on. So here was one of the Bonim Shluchim in this country. He asked a question about if an error is found in a Sefer Torah in the middle of the Teichacho, in the middle of the 42 journeys in Parshas Maseh. He heard that there's a mice that you don't switch the Sefer Torah in middle. I want to just say, before going to the detail, that about 30 years ago, I think, perhaps a bit less, we were approached by a company who does computer checking for Sefer Torah, and we took the Sefer Torah, which we had in regular use. They were put through computer checking, and if before then it was every few weeks another mistake was found, Baruch Hashem, since then the finding of a mistake in the Sefer Torah has really become a very rare event. Now, that point number one. So if you have a Sefer Torah and it hasn't been computer checked, it's so interesting because there's some mistakes which were simply because, let's say, Elikei Yisrael Nikra Oleinu, and is that spelt with an aleph or with a hey? And there was such kind of mistakes perhaps because we don't speak Hebrew as a spoken language, whatever it may be. So the computer picked up those mistakes. But the second point is, in the halachas of Sivim Kuf Bem Gimel, if a mistake is found during Kriyas HaTorah, there are various opinions. There are those who say that you have to switch the Sefer Torah in middle of the Aliyah and finish off in the kosh of the Sefer Torah. There is an opinion which says you don't have to. You can finish off, as I use the term, pull over to the hard shoulder as soon as you can. You can finish off the unit which you're doing as soon as you can in the Postel Sefer Torah. You can make a bracha achroin on the Postel Sefer Torah, and then you'll switch over between aliyahs. The reason for this is it's in a Tshuvas Rambam, and the Mordechai Pasuk is like this: that the Postel Sefer Torah, it's a letter missing, means it's possible that you're not mekayim mitzvahs ksiva Sefer Torah. Like you have a mezuzah with a letter missing, you're not mekayim mitzvahs mezuzah. So there's a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah, it's got a letter missing. But what's that got to do with Kriyas HaTorah? Who says Kriyas HaTorah has to be with the kosher Sefer Torah? The proof to this is, it says in the Gemara, Ein koyin b'chumshin. I think we've gone through this before, but Ein koyin b'chumshin mipnei kavod hatzibur. They used to have a Sefer Bamidbar, Sefer Vayikra. Ein koyin b'chumshin, you can't use a scroll of Vayikra because of kavod hatzibur. Yeah, a scroll of Vayikra happens to have 80% of the Torah missing. And the only problem is kavod hatzibur, which tells you that it's not that the din of Kriyas HaTorah is valid even in Apostle Sefer Torah. And therefore, if you find a mistake which justifies that you have to switch Sefer Torah, but you can still finish off the unit which you're doing in the Apostle Sefer Torah. You can make the bracha achrona in the Apostle Sefer Torah. Now, this is an opinion of the Mordechai, as I said, and there is a tshuva of the Tzemach Tzedek, which was published only about 40 years ago from manuscript, where he follows this opinion. Therefore, I'm just saying it's which in Nesivim Mister Shlichus got a synopsis of that in volume 1, a synopsis of that tshuva that it makes life much easier. At any rate, here we have two quotes. One is from Reb Chaim Noah and one is from the Derech HaChaim. So here we have the upper one is the Derech HaChaim, and he writes the following: If the mistake is within 3 psukim near a break. So one of the rules of aliyos is that you cannot make a break within 3 psukim before or after where there's a gap of a psuch or stuma in the Torah. So he writes, if it's 2 psukim or less near a parsha, finish. So then you'd have to read till the parsha, and you don't interrupt the middle of a pasuk. And then you have elsewhere there's also criterion where you're not meant to interrupt the middle of a session. So let's say you're not meant to end off on a negative point. So you read on till you find a positive point in the Apostle Sefer Torah. Yeah. By the way, there is a Chumash which is called the Slavita print, which is a contemporary Chumash based on the Slavita print, where it has a code where you are allowed to make a break or not. Wherever you cannot make a break, the 2 dots are in gray. Where you can make a break, they're in black. So it's just useful if you're all right. At any rate, so now that is in Derech HaChaim. So he says where you cannot pause, you cannot take a break, so finish off that unit. Now, then we have here in Reb Chaim Noah, in Siman Pei Aleph, I think it is, in Ksas HaShulchan, wherever it is, in Ksas HaShulchan, he writes the following. Let's say, if it's Shiras Hayam, in the middle of Az Yoshir, we don't break in the middle of Az Yoshir. In the middle of Aseres Dibros, we won't take a break. In the middle of the Toichacha, he doesn't differentiate whether it's in Parshas B'chokoyse or Parshas Kisavoy. In the middle of the 42 journeys in Parshas Maseh, we don't take a break. So he says in all of these, if you would, now he says, it refers to Derech HaChaim, Siman Pei Aleph, where he says that you should finish off in the Apostle Sefer Torah, as he follows the Mordechai. According to the Demramo, that you have to switch into the Kosher Sefer Torah. But as I've said, we would follow the Mordechai, that you'd finish off that section in the Apostle Sefer Torah and make a bracha. So this is the background. So there are a few areas where you would not pause in the middle, and so if you found a psul in the Sefer Torah at that point, you'd finish off that unit until the end, make a bracha achrona and then switch Sefer Torah before the next aliyah. Right. I just want to say that I read recently, in the back of our Sidurim, there's the Kriyas HaTorah for Mondays and Thursdays. Going back in Tov Shin Lamed Zayin, Tov Shin Lamed Ches, when they prepared the new print of the Siddur, that's when the English translation came out. At the same time, the Hebrew side was a whole overhaul. At the same time, they also added the Kriyas HaTorah at the back of the Chumash for Mondays and Thursdays. And when the job was near ending, so what was it? One of the Gaboyim, one of the Maskirim, in the car with the Rebbe, they told him about it, and the Rebbe asked, what did they do about the Membes Masois? Because the Welt, when it comes to Parshas Maseh, they only read the first bit. They don't go through the whole 42 journeys. In Chabad, we read the whole lot. And perhaps in earlier editions, they hadn't managed it. And here, Tuvia Zilberstrom was working on it, and he managed to locate a suitable text to be able to put in the back of the Siddur also the Membes Masois and Parshas Maseh. And the Rebbe was very grateful. He said, for the fact that they included the members masois. Now nowadays it sounds like a bit laughable. What's the big deal? In those days, Tuvia Silberstone, his budget for his work was a budget from given by Rabbi Chadakov was for a pencil and some note paper, kind of an eraser. He really, and where do you get? So he had to find some Shemus, some old Chumash, whatever, and he was able to find a matching text for the Membes Masois, and the Rebbe was grateful for that. Okay, Maisa for Matzah Shabbos. Okay, let's see. So a shliach is asking me about teaching Aleph base to a kid. The father is Jewish, the mother is not Jewish. They know that the child's not Jewish. Are you allowed to teach them Aleph base? It's not a poshet. And here you have a quote from the Sdei Chemed. He's quoting from the Zohar. One who's not circumcised, and you give him even a small letter of the Torah, it's as if you're destroying the world. Sefer Charedim, you're not allowed to teach an Ovid Kechovim, even one letter. Shalom. Gabai, you don't teach even Aleph base. Now, we know that the Aleph base, we're so fussy about the Aleph base teaching the children Komets, Aleph, or because we know that the Aleph is the word Aleph has got a Kedusha, etc. So for us, the Aleph base is not just a language, it's not just letters, characters, it's got a Kedusha to it. And because of that sensitivity, that it is that Aleph base had got Kedusha, especially, I see there's some Sofrim here on online. There's so much Kabbalah, Sodas in the Aleph base. And so, one shouldn't be teaching Aleph base. They can go and get it. They can go to Lingaphone or Berlitz or whatever. They can go online. They can teach themselves. That's not that we don't have control of that. But for us to teach a Goy Aleph base is Nishma said. Okay. So another question. Someone's asking me. Everyone knows the Mishnah in Shabbos that one should not go to the bathhouse Samach LeMincha. So he's asking, well, every Friday men go to the mikveh and they haven't done mincha. Yeah. So this is in Siman Reish Lamed Zayin, towards the end of the first part of Erech Chaim. And so now this is from the Mishnah Berurah. He says it's okay. We can rely on the shamus. He goes around and calls everyone to the shul. So then that's the basis. You can go on the Friday afternoon because the shamus will call you to the shul. Okay, but where he says if there's no shamus calling you to the shul, then that's a problem. And actually, there's a sefer called Masir Rav, which is a list of the Hanhogas of the Vilna Gaon, and one of them was that he would actually daven mincha on a Friday. He'd go daven mincha earlier and go afterwards, unless he went to before Chatzos. But if he went after Chatzos, he would first daven mincha. Okay, but most of us don't have that luxury of being able to get together a minyan on a Friday afternoon before going to mikveh. It's, I think, quite impractical for most of us. What's useful to know is that the reason for not going to a merchat samach lemincha, so in the Gemara is Gemara Shabbos, Shem Yis Aleph, you might faint. So this is, you have a quote from Avel Yashiv that pointing this out, that our mikvahs do not have that degree of steam, etc. It's not very common that people should faint in mikvahs, and therefore therefore it's okay. Okay, so relax on that one. Just when I was learning Kfar Chabad, those who remember the Kfar Chabad mikveh, there's a big dressing room, and then there's the room with the showers and the pools. And there was an old man who suffered from epilepsy, and it was a Friday afternoon, like an hour before Shabbos, and he had epileptic attack just at the door between the two rooms. That means all the people in the showers couldn't come get dressed, and all the people getting dressed couldn't go to the mikveh, whatever. Okay, let's move on. So where are we holding? We have one last question. So here's a shliach. He is making a function in a place where there's no kosher caterer nearby. So the kosher caterer is going to come probably hundreds of miles with a truck, with a van, with all his equipment, and is asking a question. Is making a hotel. The hotel has got lots of glass dishes. Is there a way that he would be allowed to use the glass dishes of the hotel instead of having to schlep the kosher dishes from hundreds of miles away. That was the question. So how strict are we as with glasses? Now, this in the past, people have asked more about drinking glasses. That's I've said it's not a problem. They could use the hotel's drinking glasses. And don't ask me about the fact that about toiveling. They belong to the goy. They don't need to be toiveled. But here's a question about dishes. Dishes means that they use them for serving non-kosher food, and now to use them for kosher. Now, let's read. Here is in Siman Tov Nun Aleph. Now, the dinim of kashering kalim appear in two places. In Hilchos Pesach, Siman Tov Nun Aleph, and in Yeredeya, in Siman Chof Aleph. But Yeredeya is quite scant, and they say, look in Hilchos Pesach. So here we have the Shulchan Aruch, klei zechuchis, glassware, even if they're used for long-term storage, even if they're used for hot, they do not need to be kashered because glass doesn't absorb. And therefore, it's enough just to rinse them off, to wash them off. So this is the shitta of the Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch, that just rinsing, washing the glass well is enough because glass does not absorb. So that means you could take chometzdike glasses, chometzdike glass dishes, and you could use them for Pesach just by washing them over. This is Hilchos Pesach, yeah. However, we have here the Ramo who says, V'yesh machmirin v'yoimin dichleis chuches loy mehane lehu hagol afilu hagol loy mehane lehu. Others take the other extreme and they say glass does absorb, and it's compared to like china, like earthenware, which you cannot kasher. So glass also cannot be kashered. V'chein haminig be'Ashkenaz or b'medinos elu. This is the Ashkenazi minhag not to kasher glassware, not to use chometzdike glassware on Pesach, and not even to rely on kashering. So on Pesach, that's clear that we do not kasher. Ashkenazim will not use glassware from chometz. Question is, what about for other isurim? Could you use glassware from milk and meat? Can you have could you have the same dish glassware for befreshiks and milchiks? Could you and again if you got it from goyim, etc. So this is not so clear. There is a sefer called, now when I said clear about the glassware, that was not an intended pun. Actually, I've always wondered, and perhaps I'm totally out of order in this, but if glass does absorb taste, why does the glass not change color? I would have imagined that the taste has got a color with it. The substance which has the taste would have a color. If it's absorbed, it should change the color of the glass. But it might be, who says so? Perhaps the taste is colorless. I don't know. Meanwhile, so this is a sefer called Sefer HaKashrus. It's a contemporary sefer, which is used widely in Eretz Yisrael by kashrus authorities. And he writes the following. B'nei Ashkenaz, for other Isurim, are makel to be machshir, whereas on for Pesach not. So, whereas according to the Shulchan Aruch, according to Rabbi Yosef Karo, glass doesn't need to be kashered. It just rinsing is good enough. Here he is saying for other Isurim, B'nei Ashkenaz would be makel to kasher. So, coming to our question, it would be what I did say to him is, if you're talking about toughened glass like Duralex or Pyrex, those everyone is generally accepted. You cannot kasher because they've got some extra ingredient there, whether it's cheres or metal. But Pyrex and the Duralex would not be kashered. But when it comes to, if it's other types of glass, then you could kasher. The one who's machmir on this is Maram Shik. Now, there's a sefer called Hag'olas Kalim, specialized about the dinim of kashering kalim, and he lists all different opinions about this, And he quotes the Maram Shik here. It's in Yeridea Simon Kuf Mem Aleph. And he says we have the idea, it's mentioned in Gemara about a lev, the heart of an animal is not Beilea because it's smooth. And yet it's Beilea Kadei Klipo. So the same thing with glass, even though the claim is that glass is smooth, therefore it doesn't absorb, but it is Beilea at least Kadei Klipo. But then he says you can. He says you could, if you bought kalim from a goy and they may have been used for non-kosher, you could kasher them. And he says, interesting, you should put by pouring hot water, and you should put like a spoon inside. As you may know, that sometimes you pour boiling water and it cracks the glass, but if you put in a spoon, it somehow manages to deflect and protect the glass from breaking. So he says, do that and kasher it with it. So he also, he's matir through kashering. So is it worth it? I don't know, but it's there is room to be makel to kasher glassware for now. All right. So let's just to go. Someone asked me, can one tell stories from Chumash to non-Jews to connect to current events to influence their religious hashkafas? Okay, the answer is that generally it's accepted that to teach goyim Torah shebichsav is permitted, and we have the famous idea that Moshe Rabbeinu inscribed the Torah on these in B'shivim Loshin, that the goyim should be able to learn the Torah from. So that's Torah shebichsav, but not Torah shebal peh. And yet they can learn Torah shebichsav, they can learn it in their language. I guess that's an interesting question. But when Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it on the rock with the Shivim Loshen, the Chayre means in their script also. All right, so that's it for tonight. And we'll finish off with a tefillah. So here is the Maram Shik. You can see here. We'll finish off with a tefillah. We should hear Yeshua's and the Besuris Tevis, the Shavuim, should return home safely, and all our Chayolim should carry out their mission successfully, and should be Nosati Shalom Ba'oretz, Shchavtem Ve'ei Machrid. Akutavoch.
Good work. Schrijf voor de initial Dvar Torah.
Kalsem.